Welcome to Capital Catch-Up, your deep dive into the halls of Congress. I am Victor.
And I am Leanie. Today we have a lot of legislative action to unpack, ranging from national security and public lands to historical reforms and key nominations. Let us start with a couple of bills focused on security, both here on Earth and up in space.
That is right. First, let us look at Senate Bill 1705, also known as the Chip Security Act. This bill requires the Secretary of Commerce to mandate security mechanisms for advanced integrated circuits and computing hardware exported from the United States. It is all about protecting American-developed technology from being stolen, diverted, or exploited by bad actors.
Exactly, and the bill has a tight timeline. It requires covered products to have location verification technology within 180 days of enactment. Exporters would also have to report any suspected tampering. The Secretary of Commerce would work with the Secretary of Defense on ongoing assessments for secondary security measures like workload verification.
Speaking of security in high-tech areas, let us look at space. Senate Bill 1898, the Orbits Act of 2025, tackles the growing problem of space junk. It directs NASA to lead a demonstration project to research and develop active debris remediation technologies, backed by $150 million in authorized funding through 2030.
It also directs the National Space Council to update and standardize orbital debris mitigation practices across federal agencies. It is a proactive step to protect our scientific and national security assets in orbit by cultivating a commercial market for space cleanup services.
Now, shifting back down to Earth, let us talk about our public lands and resources. Senate Bill 1547, the America the Beautiful Act, proposes to reauthorize the National Parks and Public Land Legacy Restoration Fund through fiscal year 2031.
This fund is crucial because it addresses the massive backlog of deferred maintenance on federal lands. But this bill also introduces strict rules. It sets specific percentage-based allocations for non-transportation projects. And it explicitly prohibits using these funds for land acquisition, employee bonuses, or road decommissioning. Plus, if the administration does not submit detailed annual project lists to Congress on time, their allocations could be withheld.
That is a significant move towards stricter fiscal oversight. And speaking of resources, there is Senate Bill 4720, the Protecting U.S. Fishers from Illegal Foreign Flags Act of 2026. This bill targets illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing by amending the High Seas Drift Net Fishing Moratorium Protection Act.
It allows the Secretary of Commerce to identify nations that permit open registries, which is when vessels operate under a country's flag without any genuine link to the actual beneficial owners. By aligning federal regulations with the Maritime Safe Act, this bill aims to close loopholes that let foreign vessels evade accountability, thereby protecting American fishers.
We also have Senate Bill 1919, the Buying American Cotton Act of 2025. This bill would establish a domestic cotton consumption tax credit to encourage the use of U.S.-grown cotton in retail products.
To get the credit, taxpayers would have to use a digital supply chain tracing system to prove the cotton originated in the United States. There are higher credit percentages for goods processed domestically or in countries with U.S. free trade agreements, and even bigger multipliers if the products contain U.S.-made cotton yarn or fabric.
Now let us turn to some social and health-focused legislation. Senate Bill 473 is the Social Engagement and Network Initiatives for Older Relief Act, or the Senior Act. It amends the Older Americans Act of 1965 to formally address loneliness among the elderly as a public health crisis.
It mandates loneliness screenings within existing supportive services and requires a comprehensive study on the prevalence and health impacts of loneliness, including how multi-generational family units can help.
Along the same lines of health coordination, Senate Bill 494, the National Plan for Epilepsy Act, mandates that the Secretary of Health and Human Services create an integrated national plan to improve the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of epilepsy.
It would establish an advisory council on epilepsy research, care, and services. This council, which includes medical experts and patient advocates, will provide recommendations to Congress to reduce health disparities and improve care. This entire initiative is set to sunset at the end of 2035.
When a bill has a sunset provision like that, it means the law will automatically expire unless Congress acts to renew it. We see that in legal transparency bills, too. Take Senate Bill 1133, the Sunshine in the Courtroom Act of 2025. It gives federal judges the discretion to allow broadcasting and photographing of appellate and district court proceedings.
But it has a 3-year sunset provision for district courts, meaning that authority is temporary unless extended. It also includes safeguards, like prohibiting the broadcasting of jurors and obscuring the identities of vulnerable witnesses.
There is also Senate Bill 1146, the Cameras in the Courtroom Act, which specifically targets the highest court. It mandates the televising of all open sessions of the United States Supreme Court, unless a majority of the justices determine that doing so would violate the due process rights of the parties involved.
These transparency bills are really interesting. Another justice-related bill is Senate Bill 1892, the Crime Victims Fund Stabilization Act of 2025. This bipartisan bill aims to bolster the Crime Victims Fund by clarifying that funds from declined criminal prosecutions must be deposited into the account. It also directs certain proceeds from False Claims Act settlements into the fund through September 2030.
That is a vital lifeline for victim support services. Let us also look at some historical and civil rights legislation. Senate Bill 193, the Neighbors Not Enemies Act, introduced by Senator Hirono, seeks to completely repeal the Alien Enemies Act of 1798.
That is a major historical reference. The Alien Enemies Act of 1798 allows the federal government to detain or deport citizens of an enemy nation during times of declared war or invasion. Critics argue it is outdated and open to abuse, so this bill would eliminate that authority. It has been referred to the Senate Committee on the Judiciary.
Another historical bill is Senate Bill 40, the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans Act, introduced by Senator Cory Booker. It would establish a 13-member commission to investigate the history of slavery in the United States and its ongoing legacy of systemic racial and economic discrimination from 1619 to 1865 and beyond.
The commission would document the impacts of slavery, Jim Crow laws, and redlining, and make recommendations to Congress within 1 year of its first meeting. This would include proposals for a national apology and potential remedies or compensation.
In terms of financial and infrastructure bills, we have Senate Bill 2585, the MAP for Broadband Funding Act. This requires the Federal Communications Commission and the National Telecommunications and Information Administration to evaluate the usability of the broadband funding map.
It also tasks the Government Accountability Office with studying interagency coordination to prevent fragmented infrastructure projects and save taxpayer money.
And Senate Bill 1808, the Access to Small Business Investor Capital Act, simplifies financial reporting. It allows registered investment companies to exclude fees associated with investments in business development companies from their acquired fund fees and expenses calculations. This is designed to reduce regulatory burdens and encourage investment in small businesses.
Finally, we have Senate Bill 1289, the 25th anniversary of September 11th Commemorative Coin Act. This directs the Secretary of the Treasury to mint gold and silver coins to honor the victims, survivors, and first responders of the 2001 terrorist attacks. Surcharges on these coins will support the National September 11th Memorial and Museum at the World Trade Center, and the program must be completely cost-neutral to the federal government.
Now let us shift to executive nominations. The Senate has received several key nominations recently.
Yes, including Michelle Steele of California to be the ambassador to the Republic of Korea, and Bradford Pentony Wilson of New Jersey to be the Archivist of the United States.
We also see Charlton Allen nominated to be General Counsel of the Federal Labor Relations Authority, and George Holding nominated to be the United States Director of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development.
For the Department of Homeland Security, Brian Kavanaugh is nominated to be Undersecretary for Management, and Cameron Hamilton is nominated to be the Administrator of the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
David Cummins is nominated to be the Administrator of the Transportation Security Administration for a 5-year term. There are also 2 nominations submitted with no description in the records.
Rounding out the list, we have Jeffrey Brodsky and William Gallo nominated as Governors of the United States Postal Service, James Woodruff as Chairman of the Merit Systems Protection Board, Don Richard Berthiaume, Jr. as Inspector General of the Department of Justice, Hal Duncan as Deputy Director of the Office of Management and Budget, and Charles Baldus as Special Counsel in the Office of Special Counsel.
These nominations tied directly into the daily Senate proceedings. Looking at the congressional record from June 17, 2026, the Senate actually considered Michelle Steele's nomination for ambassador to the Republic of Korea.
That session also featured a tribute to an Iowa student who won an award for poetry about American patriotism and military service. But it was also a day of legislative debates. Senator Grassley spoke in favor of bipartisan legislation to lower prescription drug costs by targeting anti-competitive practices and increasing supply chain transparency.
Senator Thune also spoke about the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2027, highlighting investments in unmanned systems, military readiness, and a proposed pay raise for service members.
But there was also sharp political conflict. Minority Leader Schumer strongly criticized the administration's handling of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act and demanded transparency regarding a recent memorandum of understanding with Iran, calling the administration's foreign policy disorganized.
That partisan tension was also very clear the day before, on June 16th. Senator Grassley advocated for year-round E15 ethanol sales to help the farm economy and boost energy security.
Meanwhile, the party leaders traded barbs ahead of the upcoming midterm elections. Majority Leader Thune accused Democrats of prioritizing politics over actual legislative reform, pointing to government shutdowns and border security.
In response, Minority Leader Schumer criticized the Trump administration's foreign policy on Iran, demanded details on the Memorandum of Understanding, and criticized how child care funding is being managed, claiming a proposed slush fund was being created.
It is clear that both sides are using their floor time to set the narrative for the upcoming elections. As we wrap up, what should our listeners be watching out for?
Keep an eye on how the Senate handles the upcoming National Defense Authorization Act debates, especially around unmanned systems and military pay. Also, watch the progress of the high-profile nominations like Michelle Steele and Cameron Hamilton as they move through the confirmation process.
And finally, we should watch whether the bipartisan push for court transparency and the stabilization of the Crime Victims Fund can find enough traction to pass. That is all for today's Capital Catch-Up.
Thanks for listening. We will see you next time.